Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Peach Pundit Podcast. Jason Pye, joined by Scott Turner and Buzz Brockway, our usual crew.
Yo.
And we have a special guest this week, Jennifer Strahan, and we will. Jennifer, it's good seeing you.
Nice to be here. Thank you all for having me.
We'll come back to you in just a second, but before we go on, I do want to note that we have, for those of you who missed our episode last week, we have a Patreon now. It's patreon.com/peachpundit. You can sign up and give us a monetary contribution of anywhere between $5 and $100 on a monthly basis, and each of those comes with certain perks. So please make sure you check that out. Again, it's patreon.com/peachpundit. In addition to that, you can check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, YouTube, and also peachpundit.com. And since we have a special guest this week, Ms. Strahan, do want to note that the views expressed in this podcast by each of the contributors, that's me, Scott, and Buzz, represent our own personal views and not the views of those with whom we may have a professional affiliation. So with that out of the way, Jennifer, you are running for Congress in Georgia's 14th Congressional District. Thank you, sweet Jesus. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks for getting the disclaimer out of the way. I think that's always helpful for everybody on any circumstance. We've had our fair share of that with this campaign, but very grateful to be here with you all. I will start by saying that my background is not politics. So I'm a business owner. I work mostly with hospitals and health systems, but also branch into communities and other industries. And if I had to simplify what I do with my company, we help organizations, one, do the thing that they say they're going to do in their strategic plan, and then two, do it as efficiently and effectively as possible. So two skill sets that'd be really great to actually bring to Congress. And I'm also a professor. I do have the pleasure of teaching at a business school in a master's program. I have my doctorate in healthcare leadership, which is basically business for healthcare, and genuinely just enjoy getting to do that, getting to be a part of future leaders when we think about our country and how important that is with leadership. I will also say my husband's also a small businessman or a small business owner, but he is far more talented than I am. So he's a craftsman. He builds custom furniture, cabinetry, does redesign work, things like that. And as a fun fact, we actually met in high school. So I met my husband as a freshman in high school, probably every parent's nightmare. and I've literally known him longer than I haven't. And very grateful for him. And we have a little boy who's in kindergarten. He's rocking kindergarten. He's so much fun. It's such a great time. And he's a big reason as to why I'm running. You know, I recognize the seriousness of where we are today and how many serious issues we have. And we need a serious representative who is going to stand up for our district, for our people in Georgia, and really make sure that everything is done in a way that maintaining our values. That's a core strength of us as a country, you know, and at the same time, you don't have to sacrifice effectiveness for conservative values. And I think that's one of the biggest messages that we want to just portray in this campaign and in talking to people.
I'll go with Scott next. Scott, let you take over.
So you said you don't want to sacrifice conservative values, and you don't have to do that in order to be effective. Mm-hmm. What are some of the policy areas that the 14th District is suffering right now? What are some of the things that are just simply being ignored because the current representative is off self-aggrandizing, self-promoting, or embarrassing our entire state from time to time?
Well, I would argue every policy right now is not heard for our district, right? Because of a couple of reasons. One, as you likely know, Representative Green's not on any committees right now. And committees are genuinely important. That's where the real work gets done out from behind the cameras that we often see with Representative Green. That's where you have the tough conversations. That's where you are able to not only present and promote good policy, but push back on bad policy. And to be honest, we've had our fair share of bad policy that's being pushed out across the board right now. And the second piece behind that is if you don't have relationships, then no one's listening to you, right? So it doesn't matter what policy comes up right now. She's not able to defend good policies. She's not able to push back against bad policies. And the people who hurt in the instance for that is our district. That's where the pain comes in.
I mentioned that to people. I wrote a post at Peach Pundit probably it was early on. It was early on last year, right after she got removed from her committee assignments, and she can still participate in the process through the amendment process and through floor speeches. She can disrupt things, such as suspension votes, requesting yeas and nays when it would otherwise pass by voice vote. But I think that the people who live in Georgia 14th Congressional District, who may not understand the nuances and inside baseball of Congress, don't really realize that she has been removed from her committee assignments. And yes, she might get them back. She might not. But at the same time, it's just like nobody takes her seriously as a lawmaker, and that's going to undermine any legislative. She'll never pass a piece of legislation that's not a post office renaming. And even that, I think, might be an uphill battle for her. Buzz, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Jennifer, and thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. I've been kind of watching your campaign from afar and cheering you on. But how are the folks in the district reacting to your campaign, to news, kind of the constant stream of news that your opponent generates, and what's the thinking like in your district right now?
I will say it's been a lot of fun connecting with people. That's by far the best part of campaigning, is you get to meet so many amazing people from all walks of life, all parts of the communities that we have in our district. And we have some amazing pockets of communities across our district. And everywhere I go, people recognize, especially people who are paying attention, that it is embarrassing for our district, because very seldom do we ever see positive news. And I can't think of an instance in which we do recently, for sure. And that's a shame, because we have a lot of really great things going on across our district. So in everywhere that I've been, even places where I kind of don't expect necessarily as much excitement, people have been very encouraging. They have been very positive. They're excited that we're running, because, again, this is an area that I run on conservative values and conservative principles. I want to maintain that. I think that's very important as to who we are. But at the same time, I want to get things done, right? I'm a business owner, so I have the luxury of working with people not only across our district, but across the state and nationally. I wouldn't have a business if I refused to work with people just because they disagreed with me. I mean, you have to be able to have those tough conversations. You have to be able to build those relationships. And I want to clarify, that doesn't mean that you're compromising your values. It doesn't mean you're compromising what you believe in, but you have to be able to have that. I will just say this, too, because we were talking about committees. I don't agree with the fact that any party actually kicks someone off of committees, particularly the opposite party. However, I do think it's also important to note that she's repeatedly expressed that committees don't matter. And I would say that, especially in the minority, I would argue that they actually matter even more, because that's where you're actually going to have conversation with people and push things through.
Well, Scott and I both served in the... Sorry, Jason. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, Scott and I both served in the Georgia legislature. We can attest to the fact that even if you are, unable to block a bill, you can have tremendous influence on the structure of that bill, or even if Scott and I at various times have been out of favor with the leadership of our own party, but we were still able to get stuff done through the committee process. So yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out, that is crucially important, and not being on committees means you can't do that. So
let me ask you, Jennifer, what are the top 3 issues you're running on? Because, I mean, obviously, look, you're going to get attention. You've already gotten attention. I've seen your name pop up in news stories in my morning read through both the AJC and the Hill. I mean, I read Roll Call, AJC, the Hill, Politico every single morning, and Reason every single morning. Reason magazine. Those are my normal morning reads. So I've seen your name pop up quite a bit, and obviously, you're being framed as someone who's running against she who must not be named, as we sometimes call her on this podcast. But you have to run on issues, and I know you're talking about the importance of committees and representation of the district, and those things are very important. But issues, considering the sort of nationalized politics that we face these days, you have to run on issues of substance. So what are your top 3?
So a few come to mind that I'll mention as once you're back on committees, right, once you can have those conversations. One is we look at, I have a lot of concerns with how we are spending in our nation right now. we do not by any means run our government like a business. And I personally have never heard of a government-run program that has been characterized as being efficient or effective. And that's a shame. It shouldn't be like that, right? So there's an opportunity there to make sure that, one, we have accountability and transparency and fiscal responsibility in what we're doing. And that's an area that I'm passionate about, because that's not only responsibility for us today, but we're passing generational debt on to our kids and grandkids. And they're going to be paying for that long after we're gone and not reaping the value, because too often the expenses that we have are short-sighted Band-Aids instead of really long-term solutions that address root causes. So that's one thing. And I think that is a key effort, because it impacts items at the kitchen table, right? It's the economy that we see right now. Inflation at 40-year high. People feel that. I mean, it's painful to fill up for your gas tank right now. We drive an SUV, and I like dread it. I will go till fumes because I'm like, I don't want to go see the number on that gas tank. And that's where a lot of families are at today. You know, diapers have gone up, groceries have gone up. I mean, it's just something that my husband, he's a craftsman. So think about lumber cost and materials from Lowe's and Home Depot. I mean, these costs are just, they're hard hitting. And when you think about the fact that I think it's 80% or close to 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, when you have these constant increases, that hurts our families. So that's another area besides spending, is actually helping to get our economy back on track. And then along those same lines, you know, again, we're small business owners. So how do we help make sure that small businesses are not hurting, right? How do we make sure that we're cutting back on regulations and taxes so that businesses and individuals can invest back in their business and their families, as opposed to constantly investing in government, which has shown no return on investment for people when we look at, again, the debt behind that. And then the last thing I'll mention is healthcare. So my background is healthcare. I honestly, to be completely frank, I don't think either party has done a good job in healthcare. I think we have a lot of opportunities to improve healthcare, drive down costs, improve access, improve quality, transparency. You know, there are things that we can do that can be very meaningful to every single person. And that's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. Those are American issues. I mean, again, whether you're a small business owner or an individual, the cost of healthcare is atrocious for people. Those are things that we need to think about as a nation. And honestly, we don't have enough people in Congress who really understand healthcare.
I think that's the truth. Every day I walk by my offices in Eastern Market in D.C., and every day I drive by, there's a bus stop that has I think it's the Peterson Foundation that shows the debt. So it's yesterday it was $30.3 trillion. And, you know, that's, you know, keep in mind that includes intragovernmental debt. So that's exchanges between different agencies, things like that. It's a publicly held debt's less than that, but it's still substantial and much higher than it's been in a long time. Usually, when I worked at FreedomWorks, Jennifer, I used to have a pie chart of government spending that had it broken down into 4 different quadrants. And I would say, so this big quadrant, or this big, you know, part of the pie here is mandatory spending. That's 65% of all federal spending. So, you know, and then this 15%, those are discretionary. So that's defense discretionary, non-defense discretionary, and the rest was interest on the national debt. And I'm hearkening back to a lot of my interview days when I used to interview candidates who were coming in for FreedomWorks endorsement. So I'm not going to put you through that grinder. Instead, I'm going to send it over to Scott for another question.
This will be my last question, and that is, your opponent has recently been quoted in Russian media as an example of an American politician who is supporting essentially the war against Ukraine, and they have quoted her as saying that there are actual Nazis in Ukraine. When you hear something like that, what is your reaction? What is the reaction of the people who are around you? Is that just another Marjorie moment? We're just going to, you know, are people really responding to that? Are they awake to just how it's not just an embarrassment to us, but she's actually doing real harm that can fuel a propaganda machine, and it's not acceptable to me, but I mean, is it being glossed over, or are people actually paying attention to this?
I think there's a few things at play, and I'll start by mentioning this. We have the best country in the world, right? We have problems like everywhere, but we, without a doubt, live in the best country in the world. Both my grandfathers were in the military. My brother's a Marine. My mother worked on behalf of, as a contractor with DOD. She partnered directly with Israel to help build reactive armor for tanks. I mean, we grew up with such a deference to this country. And I think that you feel that across our nation. We will always have American pride, and I think that's very important. But I think we also need to recognize that right now we see a very clear problem behind what is being spoken by our current representative and where people actually feel. And so I'll mention a couple things if you don't mind. One, Ukraine's obviously a sovereign nation. I'm not saying they're a perfect nation, but they're a sovereign nation that's a very young democracy that we need to help support as a democracy. And there's no justification for Russia as an aggressor to try to take over Ukraine, and especially with propaganda and spreading lies and mistruths across the justification for that, if you will. Yeah. And when she is out there parroting a lot of the comments from Putin and from the propaganda that Russia is spreading, and they're using her as an influence and as a voice to say America supports us, and they believe Ukraine is as corrupt as what we're telling you we are. That's a problem, and that's not only a problem for, obviously it undermines Ukraine when they've got bombings in residential areas, missiles in maternity wards. I mean, there's a lot of concerns on what's going on, a lot of death that obviously we're seeing with Ukraine. This is a national security issue. Now, I will also say I do not believe America should be sending U.S. troops on the ground over there, but I do think it is our responsibility, or as a part of that responsibility with other countries, obviously across the world, to support Ukraine as a sovereign nation, selling them weapons, making sure we can support with humanitarian aid. These are important issues. So I'll stop with this. But we did a telephone town hall last night, had a really great turnout, and in the midst of that, there was a live poll that was done in that town hall, and 90% of people on that town hall, so they side with Ukraine, not Russia. So that's just another instance in which she is out of touch with how people in our district and in our state and country really feel about the issues, the serious issues going on today.
Well, I'm going to give Buzz the last question, and then we'll let you go. But before I do that, just want to say, if you ever want any discussion or any coaching on criminal justice issues or civil liberties issues, just let me know. It's what I do for a living. So, and I happy to help you out. Buzz, go ahead and last question.
Yeah. So one thing that I think some experts have pointed out that's a problem in the Congress that I think is a problem as well is that there are people who want to use the job of being a member of Congress as a platform to something else. They want to build a social media profile. They want to build a national profile. They want to do things to get a show on a TV network or a book deal or whatever. And I think that's what we're seeing with the current representative of the 14th, is she's more interested in building a national profile. There are other members of Congress. I think AOC on the left is more or less doing the same thing. She's building a national profile and not really focused on the issues of her district. So, do you agree with me that's a problem in politics these days? And what's your approach to being a representative of the 14th district should the voters choose you?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that's evident. It's actually a core part of our message, is that somehow we've lost sight of the fact that politics is supposed to be public service. It's supposed to be an opportunity to serve the people. It's not to be a celebrity or a social media celebrity, to have your own microphone constantly behind you. And I feel like too often we see our political leaders chasing likes and media clicks as opposed to actually following the conversation where it needs to go that brings value and benefit back to people. That's one of the great things about our country is it's our civic responsibility to make sure that we are holding our leaders accountable. I'm very grateful that my career has been spent largely in healthcare and with communities because it's mission-driven industries, right? These are areas where I've been very blessed to know a lot of wonderful servant leaders, and that's the leadership that we need to see in Congress. And that's what I will, fight to bring back, is that we need to restore integrity, we need to restore value and purpose in what we're doing. And at the end of the day, we need to get results. We need to hold our leaders accountable to get results. And so I do think it's critical to make sure that we're maintaining an effort on service and not just being a social media celebrity. And that's what I can guarantee with voters is I actually don't like all of the attention, the media piece. That's been a big adjustment for me. So I think there's value in that it's transparent. It helps people to be able to see that. But that is a different world, and that's not why I'm in it. I can promise you that. So I think about the real good that we can do, and that gets me excited.
Well, Jennifer, before you go, just give us where we can find you online, where your website and your social media, if you have any. I'm assuming you do. Everybody has social media these days.
We do. So strahanforcongress.com is where people can find, obviously, our campaign website. They can see issues, they can see other things, and, of course, find contact information to connect with us as part of this campaign, this mission that we're obviously doing. But also we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and so they can follow along with me there and keep communicating with me. If there's anything people want to know, I'm an open book, so by all means, please reach out. Happy to connect with people.
Well, best of luck to you. I know I'm pulling for you. I think Scott and Buzz are as well. So
definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and we wish you the best, and hopefully we'll have a good result in May.
Absolutely.
You actually got Jason to say thank Jesus, which is on this podcast a rarity. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that, Scott. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for letting me come join you. It's been a blast, and I love listening to your show, so appreciate it.
Thanks. All right, guys. Well, we have other topics to discuss on the podcast. Looks like before we came on, before I came in here to start recording, I noticed that the mental health bill is moving. It looks like it's going towards may have already gotten passed in the House.
It did. It got passed.
Headed to Governor.
The House agreed to the Senate substitute.
Yeah. So we overcame the crazy and got a bill passed, right?
Well, I guess there were amendments to the bill.
Is that
right?
a joke? Was that a pun? Intentionally, Jason?
Yeah.
That was epic. If that was intentional,
it was actually intentional. But the crazy I'm referring to are the crazies who were saying that this bill was socialism and Marxism and led to my rant last week. That's what I was referring to. But Scott, tell us where we're at.
So I have not had a chance to read the bill. I did talk to my upcoming Senator Kay Kirkpatrick about it. She said it is a conservative version of what they were trying to do in the House. I guess there's some mandates that have been removed, and this is just a very brief conversation I had with her about it. She was very involved. She's a doctor, so she has a vested interest in healthcare policy, and she was telling me, we took out some of the more egregious things, and it passed unanimously in both chambers, 163-0 on the agree in the House when it came back over. So big policy win for both parties, really. But this was an initiative that was started. We have to recognize David Ralston for his efforts here.
Yep.
Todd Jones, State Representative Todd Jones from Forsyth County, sort of led the charge. Now, there were a few people who had hang-ups, right? And they expressed those hang-ups. Those hang-ups caused some drama. There were people who latched on to the arguments that were being made by various people in the community and blaming the people who voted no the first time it left the House. Well, they got their unanimous vote this time. So the only thing I will say about this is I know there are a lot of hurt feelings amongst the House members who have been called all kinds of names. They've been called things like pedophile protectors and globalists and all kinds of stuff. And the reason why is because there were some references to the World Health Organization, DSM-5, other documents that sort of define the different conditions for mental health issues. And there's a healthy amount of skepticism around those things amongst the electorate in Georgia, especially on the conservative side. And they're willing to go and burn torches and carry pitchforks around the Capitol and virtually, not literally, but virtually skewer people. And so a lot of feelings got hurt in the House Majority Caucus especially. And I'm hoping that there can be some healing now, because the people who voted no did so for policy reasons. Did they go, were they sort of abrasive in their language? Probably, but that's how, you get a little bit gritty and things get moving. And that's what happened here. When it got over to the Senate, a lot of the people who voted no, every single one of their concerns was addressed. And now we have a mental health piece of legislation that's going to pass, and it's going to go to the governor's desk for signature. And it was a big, long process, and that's what it looks like, right? That's what the legislative process looks like.
But I think this is why you don't call names and you don't, call your legislator and accuse him of being a pedophile supporter or whatever.
Amen.
Because this is a legislative process. The House worked on the bill. They produced a document that passed overwhelmingly, had three opponents who expressed three folks who voted no, who expressed their reasons for voting no. And then it came over to the Senate. And they carefully considered it, and they negotiated with the House, and they came up with a product that accomplishes what the goals were, which is to improve the state of mental health in the state of Georgia. And it wasn't because of accusing people of being pedophile supporters. It's because of other people, reasonable people, sat down and said, "Hey, maybe there's another way we can approach this and accomplish the same goals." And that's what happened in reality. And I think, listen, I think if I could just take a moment to point this out, in Gwinnett County, week before last, we had an incident. A Greyhound bus left the city of Atlanta. When it got up into Gwinnett County, the bus driver notified police that there was a guy on the bus who appeared to be having a mental breakdown and was waving a gun. Gwinnett police have with them, embedded in their police force, mental health experts. These are police officers who are mental health experts. They arrived on the scene, and guess what? The situation was resolved. That gentleman, he'll probably be facing some criminal charges because he did threaten people with a gun, but he's alive, and nobody was hurt. And I think this is the kind of stuff. This is why this bill was so important, because this will. I've been told. I've skimmed through the bill, but I've been told, and I haven't seen the version that passed, but this will make it easier for law enforcement around the state to take advantage of these kinds of folks who are mental health experts who can come in and assist law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they got it done. Hopefully Governor Kemp, has he committed to sign it? Do you guys know?
I doubt when you get a bipartisan piece of legislation like this that passes unanimously in both chambers, the governor's probably not going to.
I think early in the session, as I recall, he's expressed praise for the legislature for taking this issue up. So.
So I know everybody was paying attention to the Trump rally this past weekend. I think it was in Commerce, and I noticed from pictures I saw online that the crowd looked substantially smaller than what I have seen from Trump rallies in the past. What do you guys first of all, what do you guys make of that, and secondly, do you make of it, do you think this bodes poorly for not just David Perdue's campaign, but some of the other Republicans who are running with a Trump endorsement? Buzz, go to you first.
Yeah, well, so there's as is the case with everything Trump is involved in, there's controversy around it. Trump supporters are claiming this was as large a crowd as had ever been seen in the state of Georgia. Phil Kent wrote an article claiming that he had talked to experts who said there were 16,000 people there. Stephen Fowler
That's still twice as many as. 16,000 is what he said. That's still twice as. I'm sorry, that's not twice as many. That's half as many as what the Trump campaign people said.
Yeah.
They said 30,000, right?
So Stephen Fowler of WABE, or Georgia Public Broadcasting, excuse me, he estimated around 5,000. I don't know. It's probably somewhere in between 5 and 16, which, as Scott points out, is and I think is what we've seen in other rallies when Trump was at the height of his popularity was bigger. But I mean, I think there's no doubt. I think we hear it anecdotally, we see it. We saw. I didn't watch the whole rally. I saw bits and pieces of it. Trump was supposed to come on at 7:00. And apparently now he was never going to be there. He was only going to come at 7:45, whatever. He finally showed up on stage at 8:45. So there was an hour and 8:15, excuse me. There was an hour and 15-minute gap between the last speaker and Donald Trump speaking. I think the crowd's just kind of watching things. They look bored out of their minds to stand there for an hour and 15 minutes with nothing. So I mean, it was kind of
so windy.
Yeah, it was very windy and cold for a March night in Georgia, and then I think some of the response, and reporters talking to people, not everybody there was there because they were super fired up about David Perdue or Herschel Walker or whoever. They're there because they love Trump, and some of them obviously are going to fall in line and do what Trump vote the way Trump wants them to for that whole slate. But many of them are not, and I think it's getting to that thing that I'm hearing from more and more people, even folks who love Trump. They'll say, "I love Trump, but I'll make up my own mind about who I'm going to vote for the offices that affect me." So I don't think it's is it the end of Trump in Georgia? No, not at all. But it wasn't the thing that's going to light the fire in David Perdue's campaign, I don't think.
Right, and so we end up in this scenario where the Trump campaign people are saying it was bigger than it was. Anybody who was there subjectively, Stephen Fowler, as Buzz mentioned, has covered Trump events. He has said in the past, when he was at the Rome rally, he was like, "There's at least 20,000 people here," and because they went back as far as the eye could see. The photos that were posted, you could actually see where the media was set up. There was a pair of like lift cranes that were holding a lighting rig above where the media was set up, and that was about 100 to 150 feet from the stage because it was lighting the stage. And the media was right below that, and they turned around and took photos, and the crowd wasn't more than 15 rows deep behind the porta potties that had been set up there.
Yeah.
And you could actually see empty fields and empty parking lot behind that.
Yeah,
and that's the first time that's ever happened at a Trump rally
Yeah.
in Georgia. Every other Trump rally that's ever happened, there were people as far as you could see.
Yeah, I was going to say the pictures I saw on Twitter over the weekend. I mean, I didn't watch the rally. I have no interest in watching rallies like that. But just the pictures I saw, there might have been 2,000 people, maybe. But
well, I mean, whether it was 2,000, 5,000, or even 16,000, even at 16,000, where Phil Kent is calling that a win, that's significantly lower than any type of enthusiasm level that we've ever seen associated with Donald Trump in Georgia. Yeah. Now, that being said, I think the reason for that is look at who he's endorsing.
Yeah.
Right? The electorate is not fired up for David Perdue, and they're not going to get fired up for David Perdue. He's endorsed a Democrat for Congress over other Republicans who have an actual conservative record.
Yeah.
He's endorsed some guy. It's a couple of guys that we've never even heard of, who he had to be reminded to say Patrick Witt's name at the end.
Really?
He didn't. Patrick Witt and Vernon Jones both got one mention, and it was in the last 5 minutes of his speech where he went down the list of people he wanted you to go vote for.
Did anybody did anybody make sure that Vernon Jones knew that Commerce, Georgia wasn't in his district?
I'm sure there are signs up there.
I'm sure there were plenty of signs left asking people to go vote for Vernon for Georgia. So all of this to say that it's going to depend on the quality of the candidate. Yeah. These guys are going to have to go run their own race. They're not going to be able to say Donald Trump has endorsed me and therefore you should vote for me. That's not going to be the winning message.
Right.
The reason why Herschel is up big is because he's Herschel freaking Walker, right? But David Perdue is not Herschel Walker.
Yeah.
And Vernon Jones is not anywhere close to Herschel Walker. And so these guys they have a real problem. They have a real problem, and that is they're going to have to go out and they're going to have to earn votes. And I don't think they know how. And I think they've been lazy in their campaign. And so they haven't, especially David Perdue. When you see David Perdue in public at a local like Republican Party, he emanates, I don't want to be here. it radiates off of him. He's like, oh, I don't want to be here. These plebes. I need to get back to my gated community.
The $600 jean jacket only gets you so far.
Yeah, but you know what was really troubling for me? And when I woke up the next morning, this was really disappointing to me. And that is, at a certain point, David Perdue is speaking, and he says, those who have allowed this election to be stolen need to be held accountable. And then the crowd behind him starts chanting, lock him up, lock him up. And every member of the media heard what the crowd was chanting, and everybody around them heard what was chanting. It was a "Let's go, Brandon" moment, apparently, because David Perdue is now saying, "Well, I didn't understand him because what he did was he gave him a thumbs up and smiled at him. Lock him up." David Perdue smiling, thumbs up. That's disgusting. Now, look, I have heard with my own ears. I heard it with my own ears when David Perdue said, when he loses to Brian Kemp, he'll be Brian Kemp's biggest cheerleader. How do you get from that point A?
Did he say when or if?
To this point B?
I think that was Scott's. Like amendment to
That's
what
what
David
Scott
Perdue
heard. He probably said
Scott
if.
doesn't know what we're saying. You said when David Perdue loses.
I know what I said.
But no, I mean, how do you walk that back? Where because there is such a thing. You've seen this. You would see this in television dramas and things like that, where you've talked so much smack about your opponent. Can you actually go out and endorse him? The crowd is shouting, "Lock him up," and you're giving a thumbs up and smiling. So how are you going to walk that back?
You don't. There is no unity to be had. You look. I know I said win. I said it on purpose because I live in the real world. It's not an if in my mind, right? It's a win. We know that on May 25th that the nominee for governor for the state of Georgia's Republican Party is going to be Brian Kemp. We know that. We know that this is a quixotic attempt at slaying a dragon that doesn't exist and tilting at windmills. And here we are at a point where we cannot come back from that. When Casey Cagle lost the nomination for governor, the first thing he did was he rented out a ballroom, and we all got together up there in Dunwoody and the Hilton up there, and we got in the ballroom and we all hugged it out in front of the cameras and said, "We're united. We're going to go." Yeah. How does that work? Yeah. I mean, is Donald Trump going to be okay with David Perdue, his friend, sharing a stage with Brian Kemp, saying, "This is the man we need to beat Stacey Abrams"? How do we get back from there?
We're talking about.
I mean, the damage that David Perdue has done here, I'm afraid, is irreparable. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm afraid it is.
No, I think you're right, and we're talking about Donald Trump because, Trump cannot let go of things. Now, yes, and we're going to get into this in a second, that Trump is already starting to set the stage for what is an inevitable Perdue loss. But, I mean, we're talking about a guy who can't let go of anything that he asked Vladimir Putin just yesterday or this week to give any information or any dirt he has on the Biden family. This is Perdue. Putin is a pariah in the world's eyes right now, and you have Donald Trump's like, "Excuse me, sir, do you have any dirt on the Biden family?" I mean, and so he has if Perdue goes and stands on a stage with Brian Kemp after all the trash that Trump has said about Brian Kemp, while Perdue has been standing on stage and then also giving an approving thumbs up and smile when they're saying lock him up, you can't walk that back. It's impossible. And Perdue would call him weak afterwards, and he would never be able to get elected to anything ever again. Not that he's going to anyway.
Well, I mean, it's gonna Trump somehow has to make peace with Kemp. If we're not gonna get stuck with Stacey Abrams, and I think what you have to, it's in Donald Trump's best interest that Stacey Abrams not be elected, because he will absolutely be blamed for this. Donald Trump will. David Perdue will get a lot of blame too, but Donald Trump will, because Donald Trump talked David Perdue into running. And Donald Trump is the one, all of David Perdue's ads are all about Trump, are all about Trump saying this, and they're not in David Perdue's own words saying, I want to be governor because of XYZ. It's all about how Kemp let us down, and Kemp betrayed us, and really Kemp betrayed Trump. Not Kemp betrayed any conservative principle. Kemp betrayed Trump. That's what it's all about. That's what the whole campaign's been about. So somehow, Trump has to make peace with Kemp and has to get his people stirred up because they'll go home and walk away. I mean, they've done it before. They did it to David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler earlier this year. They'll do it again.
Yeah, Scot,
and that will be
Scot,
absolutely laid at Donald Trump's feet.
Yep. Scott, you noted in the agenda that Donald Trump is, and I mentioned this a second ago, that Donald Trump is setting the stage for an inevitable Purdue loss. What is Trump saying? And it seems like he sees the writing on the wall already.
I believe it was that same interview that you mentioned about the Putin stuff, where he said, "Look, I endorse a lot of people."
Speaking to One American News, right? That's who he's talking to. Somebody on One American News.
Yeah. Well, he said, I endorse a lot of people, and therefore I'm going to lose one. And when I do, these people are going to be dishonest. It's going to say it's a huge embarrassment. And I don't think he talks that way unless he saw the crowd size in Commerce this past weekend and realized for himself, oh, okay. Because at the end of his speech in Commerce, he said, I hope you win, David, or otherwise I wasted a hell of a lot of time. Right? And that was his closing line. Well, he realized the crowd wasn't into it. The crowd was filing out. They were leaving early. Mm-hmm. He felt the lack of momentum for this campaign. He's trying to single-handedly save it. So he recognizes it's going to be a loss. It's not going to be just one loss, but Patrick Witt has no shot. John Gordon has no shot.
Vernon
I don't know how. What's that?
Vernon
Jones might make a runoff, but I think Mike Collins will probably beat him.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me because Mike Collins thinks that Donald Trump's the greatest president in American history. and you've got these other guys, Jody Heiss. Jody Heiss and Burt Jones and Herschel Walker are the three probable wins. But that's less than half of his slate. He's got 7 candidates.
Yeah.
And that's less than half. And what we are learning in Georgia is that the quality of the candidate matters more than anything else, whether it's a presidential endorsement or not. Will the presidential endorsement hurt you? Yes. If you're the opponent, if you're the guy without the endorsement, it would help you if you had it. But you cannot run on that alone. And that is what we're learning about here in Georgia. Mm-hmm. Trump is not dead. We're not signaling that he's got no influence here. That's not what we're saying at all. But just because he wants it to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen here.
It seems that his influence is at least dwindling to some degree,
mm-hmm.
and I think that's a good thing. Buzz, you have anything you want to add?
Well, I think Trump's complaining about in the clip that you're mentioning, Scott. Trump's complaining and whining about how mean people are going to be to him if David Perdue loses, and they're going to, I have this unbelievable record, and they're going to attack me, and they're going to be very, very mean to me, and all this sort of stuff. And so it's still all about him. But he's the one who set up these expectations. He's the one, him and his key supporters are the ones who have said, all you need to do is get Trump's endorsement and you're golden. He's the one who demands that these candidates come traipsing down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, and as if he's some sort of mafia boss. I'm not accusing him of being a mafia boss. I'm saying he's kind of like that in the sense that he thinks that nobody in the Republican Party should be able to move without his permission. And that's not how political parties work on either side. As popular as Barack Obama is, not everybody he endorses wins on the Democratic side. As popular as Ronald Reagan at the height of his popularity, he didn't act this way. Trump's the only one who acts this way, and he set himself up for this because it's inevitable that people are going to look around and say, you know what, it's time to move on, and we're looking for toward the future.
So earlier this week, sorry, Brian Kemp signed legislation into law allowing for the opting out of masks. So I know there's been a lot of consternation about people wearing masks at this stage in the pandemic. There are very few businesses even requiring that anymore. Some say recommended, but they're not making you wear them. Unless you're in Washington, D.C. and want to go into a bookstore and you don't have your mask with you and you only realize when you're walking into the door that they require masks. That happened to me just yesterday. Scott, so tell us about this bill.
Yeah, so it's just one of the red meat issues to throw out during a primary. I guess their legislation passed along partisan lines saying school boards, local governments can't force people to wear masks, specifically in schools. And so the kids who wear masks for 2 years don't have to. And here's something I think is interesting. You know, people say, follow the science on this, follow the science. Well, here in Cherokee County, we never had a mask mandate. We were one of the first, if only, school districts in the entire country to go back to in-person learning. And when we did, there was no mask mandate. And they managed, you know, there were sometimes they shut down schools for a week or two to do cleaning and send everybody home for distance learning during those times. They were flexible, they adapted, and Cherokee County School District superintendent, assistant superintendent were at the bill signing yesterday as examples of school systems that could do this from the beginning. And so there are going to be, I think, long-term studies about the mental health and the overall health of the kids who are masked versus unmasked. But we proved here in the county that I live in that you can do this without a massive outbreak amongst the children, and you can manage public health and safety without having to do this. And really, I think what happened was the science, quote unquote, changed, right? We learned that certain types of masks were completely useless anyway. Even though we had been told, you know, wear your cloth masks. You know, we were told the paper masks were fine. And then it had to be N95 eventually. And even then, by that time, the science had caught up. We had learned that what was effective and what wasn't. And what we had been doing all along wasn't all that effective.
Yeah.
So I think it's good. I think it's a red meat bill. It's definitely partisan. But it goes back to this concept that I think the Kemp administration and Republicans throughout the legislature want to try to give to the public that, hey, we're on your side. We want you to be empowered. You want to wear a mask, you wear a mask, but the government's not going to tell you to do it. And you can take the risk and you can take your own safety into play. If you want to wear a mask, do it, but we're not going to be the ones to tell you to.
Buzz?
Yeah, I think there were some other aspects of this bill, if I'm not mistaken, some additional curriculum transparency issues and things like that were important too. I get a little queasy about, you know, trampling on local control. You know, I don't like mask mandates, but you know, we do elect local school board leaders. So, you know, but I think there's some other aspects of this bill I think that were good. That opening up curriculum transparency and things like that are very good. So I applaud the governor for bringing it forward.
So I don't know why the Georgia Republican Party exists as the Georgia Republican Party. It should just be called the Georgia Trump Party because that's effectively what it is at this point in time. The reason I say that is because the state legislature, obviously sine die is upon us, is coming soon. And the Georgia Republican Party in an election year is not talking about the big wins that you would ordinarily see them talking about in the before times, in the long ago, before Donald Trump existed on the scene. And I find that to be very strange. Political parties tend to talk about their big legislative wins that are and promote them with the base and show them and put them in the news and send out press releases. And the only thing I see anymore is Donald Trump, and then Rick Scott apparently coming to Georgia as well, which I got an email about that the other day. This strikes me as a little strange. They're not talking about significant wins. And I got to wonder how much longer the Georgia Republican Party is going to allow this current posture go along.
I have a theory, and it all has to do with the date of May 24th. The party leaders, David Schaefer, Brett Frost, those guys, they don't want to see Brian Kemp be the nominee. Mm-hmm. And anything that they post right now in celebration of the fact that they've cut the income tax, I mean, you wouldn't know it. I mean, this is a red meat Republican issue. The governor is signing a bill that is cutting the income tax down to 5.25% on the top end. That's significant. He's given $1 billion rebate of money that was collected back to the taxpayers because they didn't need it, right? There's not a single word on any social media, nothing in email, nothing from the party about that at all. We've got a mental health bill, nothing. We've had school choice debates, nothing. We've had all kinds of good conservative wins. We've had 2 gun bills right now that are making their way through the House and the Senate that would remove the requirement for you to have a permit in order to carry and exercise your Second Amendment rights. The parties remain silent. It is noticeable, you boys over there at Republican Party headquarters. I'm calling you out because what you're doing is obvious. You should be celebrating these wins. You're not doing it because it's Brian Kemp as governor and you don't want him there. And if you're David Schaefer, you're Brant Frost, you're those guys who are in charge of the Republican Party right now, you're doing the whole party a disservice by not celebrating these wins. You need to be celebrating these wins. Please. For the party's sake.
At least At least they haven't gone so far as David Perdue has to actually criticize tax cuts and freezing the gas tax as Kemp has just done, and sending rebates to people since we had a surplus money. Instead of spending it, he's sending it back to the taxpayers. Those are normally things that, as you guys point out, that conservatives celebrate. But Perdue is because of this weird posture he's in, is taken to criticizing them. So at least Schaefer's not doing that.
No,
but the silence is noticeable. No doubt.
They're too busy getting their photo taken with Donald Trump and posting that on social media to post something about how outstandingly conservative this legislative session has been. I mean, in both chambers, in the House and the Senate. The legislators that we have sent down there that have an R next to their name have done yeoman's work on the Republican agenda, and they're not saying one single thing. I tweeted about this.
Except
Chuck
for
Martin,
school
representative
choice.
from Alpharetta. Well, I mean, yes, but the other stuff is good stuff to celebrate, right? And it took Chuck Martin to say, well, what about the tax cut, Scott? And I was like, good point, Chuck. Yeah. Why isn't HQ over there screaming from the mountaintops, we cut income taxes? When we were in the legislature and we did that, I don't know if you were there when we cut the first quarter point. Mm-hmm. Everybody was celebrating. The party was celebrating. The caucus was celebrating. They were sending out. We had little memes that we were using, and we were coordinating our message. Nothing like that now. Nothing. This party is not interested in actually celebrating Republican wins, and it's obvious to me.
And additionally, they had to clarify through their spokesperson that the ballot questions that they picked were not meant to favor any one particular primary candidate. Of course, I was scratching my head as to why Buckhead City was on there when that's a local issue. Not, I don't know that in Hira that's a top flight issue. So why in the world are we sticking a Buckhead City question on the statewide GOP ballot? Except that David Perdue talks about it all the time. So they obviously are. People are questioning whether they're taking sides or not, and I think what you're raising
they are.
Further
I'm not questioning.
That.
I'm calling them out for I'm not questioning anything, Buzz. I'm calling them out. They're taking sides, and they need to stop it. It's ridiculous. These guys under the Gold Dome, these ladies and gentlemen who represent us with R's next to their names, have done the work. Celebrate them. Yeah. Celebrate them.
So, our last topic of the night. When I was at Freedom Works, I actually talked about this last night because I went to a happy hour and one of my old staff were all there, and one of them was talking to her, Sarah, Scott, Buzz. I know you met her recently, and Scott's met her before. And I said, Sarah, what was my one rule when we had an office email us about a tax credit bill? And she said the answer was always no. We would always say we would not support your tax credit bill, and the reason we didn't support tax credit bills is because tax credits, deductibles are fine. Tax deductions are fine. Tax credits is spending in the tax code, and it tends to favor certain industries. Georgia, for several years now, has had a film tax credit. And I am of the mind that film tax credits are not worth any tax credit, but especially almost any tax credit, but especially film tax credits are not worth it. And Georgia does not have a cap on its film tax credit. The state spends about $1 billion a year, roughly, give or take. On these tax credits, they're transferable. And before we dive into this discussion, I do want to note the Tax Foundation, looking at their website from quoting a 2016 study, mentions two separate studies that were published, one by the American Review of Public Administration and American Politics Research. They examined why states adopted or terminated film tax incentive programs and measures the effects of film tax credits in 40 states on employment and wages from 1998 to 2013. And Georgia adopted its film tax credit around this time, if I recall. Mm-hmm. The authors found that sales tax waivers had no measurable impacts. Transferable tax credits had a small sustained effect on employment, but no effect on wages. And the most generous form of tax credit, refundable tax credits, had no employment effect and a temporary wage effect. Spending more on incentives had no lasting impact. So there is discussion underway of capping the film tax credit in Georgia. And let me pull my Ron Swanson here and just say, slash it.
Yeah, am I correct?
Am I wrong, guys? Guys, am I wrong?
No, I don't think so.
So the film tax credit in Georgia.
Go ahead, Buzz. Buzz first.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the proposal comes from Representative Chuck Hufstetler, capping it at $800 million and getting rid of the ability to resell the tax credit, which is really why, I mean, that is maybe the key thing that has made this thing balloon up to over $1 billion. So,
yeah. The way it works is you go to have your event or your film in Georgia. You start filming. You get the money in advance, essentially. And the way that you do that is you say, oh, I'm going to get $15 million, or I'm going to make it $10 million in credits. I'm going to sell that my $10 million for $9 million, and somebody's going to give me $9 million in cash, and I'm going to sell that to an organization that actually does owe taxes here in Georgia, say like a Home Depot or whatever. So Home Depot buys that for $9 million, and they have a $1 million reduction in the number in their tax bill. And so what you've done is you've transferred the wealth from the state. That $1 million that would have been paid by Home Depot is now in the pocket of the company that is actually based in California.
Yeah.
So we're transferring our wealth outside the state by doing this. There's an economist, Bradbury is his first name is Bradbury out of
J.C. Bradbury,
who's done a study.
Mm-hmm.
J.C. Bradbury, has done a study on this, and we're actually losing money. The reason why the state says it's a huge $8 billion or more impact to the economy is they take the total number of dollars that are spent this way, not paying attention to whether or not they were transferred or if the money went out of state or if it was spent here. But they just simply multiply it by 2.3. So every dollar that we spend, we assume that we're going to get 2.3 back. Mm. And that's how they and when you ask them, how do you get to that number? Because you're looking at a guy when he was in the legislature, ask that question. How did you get to that 2.3 number? We've been using it since 1973. Well, how did you create it then? Like, I mean, you do realize that I'm younger than that formula, right? Like I'm 46 years old. I'm younger than that formula. You've never revisited it. You've never seen if it was true. Well, it's what we've been using since 1973, so we're going to go with it. So we just every dollar we spend, we multiply it 2.3, and that's the economic impact in Georgia. Well, that's not based in reality. There's nothing real about that. So kudos to Chuck Hufstetler for capping this for a lot of different reasons, but mainly because it is a transfer of wealth out of state and we are not seeing the economic returns. Anybody who has tried to study this objectively from an economic lens, a guy like J.C. Bradbury, who is an economist at Kennesaw State, will tell you we're not getting that type of return on this investment.
I mean,
just not
there is
because of the transferability. So that is like the biggest key. Even if you didn't cap it, you'd want to have that ability to sell it. Turned
I
off.
agree. Yeah. I mean, I think there is a real film industry in Georgia. There are people who live in Georgia who work in the film industry. I got a tour a couple weeks ago of Trillis Studios, which used to be the old Pinewood Studios. It's where a lot of the Marvel's movies are filmed. There's a real industry here, but as J.C. Bradbury points out, it's not as large as our friends at the Georgia Department of Economic Development say it is. It's an industry. It is employing Georgians. It's not as huge as some would have us believe. So, capping it and getting rid of the transferability seems completely in order, and I don't think will cost any jobs in the state of Georgia.
I remember the economic impact of the various halls of fame that Georgia used to have was 90% what the money the state poured into it. That the legislature appropriated to it, and the remainder was basically like ancillary stuff that came because of tourism. It may not even been as high as 90% or low as 90%. It may have been higher than that. It may have been like 95%, but in that multiplier effect, I mean that's the Keynesian, the neo-Keynesian style of economics that you have this multiplier effect, but you got to be able to explain where that you got to be able to justify that multiplier. Because I guarantee you it's not 2.3%. But it seems like
that's really 230%, right? I mean that's 2.3. Using a multiplier of 2.3 is really 230%. So.
Right. Yeah.
Well, guys, that's all the time we have for tonight. It's good seeing you, both of you. And special thanks to our guest, Jennifer Strahan, who once again is running for Congress in Georgia's 14th Congressional District. So please make sure you check out her website. I followed her on Twitter while we were recording. And hopefully we'll see a good result in that in just under 2 months now. So the primary season is fast approaching. So make sure you check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and YouTube. And please continue to visit peachpundit.com. So,
Patreon.
Patreon.com/peachpundit, where you can subscribe for all sorts of extra content. Because we eventually have to start justifying the use of the new platform that we're doing to record the podcast. So that's it. Thanks so much. Peace out. Take care. Have a good rest of your week. We'll see you next week.
Next week, guys.